Hold up. Does anyone remember The Incredibles? If you're a fan of animated movies, you're probably a fan of The Incredibles. This thing's got everything from phenomenal voice acting to memorable writing to gorgeous visuals. Well, at least for 2004, it did. You see, if you're like me, you probably remember the basics of this show. The strong dad, the fast son, the stretchy mom. But what if I told you this movie is a lot more disturbing than you might think? Dealing with themes such as infidelity, treachery, and even death. It's not super uncommon for animated movies nowadays to have deeper meanings. That way, if you're exactly like me and have chronic back pain and have no idea what a skibbity toilet is, you can still enjoy what you're watching. But the truth is, The Incredibles goes above and beyond when it comes to its mature themes. So much so that after you finish this video, you might not ever be able to view this movie the same way again. I mean, I'm overreacting a little bit here, okay, but still, this movie's crazy. So today, I'll be taking a look at the movie The Incredibles in full while analyzing the good, the bad, and the downright creepy scenes that make the show an all-time classic. So if you're ready to jump into it like I am, grab your copy of Stuart Little 2 for the Game Boy Advance. I really need to start covering movies I actually have games for. And without further ado, let's watch Pixar's very own The Incredibles. Also, real quick, remember to subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I make videos like these all the time, and I'm trying to hit 25,000 subscribers before my birthday in June. It would mean the world to me. Okay, I'm sorry for asking. On to the movie. Our story begins with Mr. Incredible. We see him driving somewhere when all of a sudden, there's a mention of a high-speed police chase nearby. Mr. Incredible, being the altruistic man that he is, switches a dial on his car around, which activates superhero mode. This must be the new Tesla update. Those things basically drive themselves. He's going really, really fast when all of a sudden, an old lady walks in the middle of the road and gets ran over at 150 miles per hour. Obviously, I'm kidding. It wouldn't be very super of him to flatten an old granny like that, would it? No, the old lady just wants her cat out of a tree, and because he's super strong, Mr. Incredible saves the cat and then rotates the tree 180 degrees and stops the bad guys on the road. Remember how he was behind the bad guys like 2 minutes ago? They must have taken a detour, I guess. Mr. Incredible gets back to his car when he realizes there's another person inside it. But don't worry, this isn't a bad guy. This person just so happens to be a huge fan of Mr. Incredible, and also he's like just a kid. I'd imagine this is what it feels like to be a teenage white girl when there's a new serial killer documentary on Netflix.
I am your #1 fan!
Anyway, the kid wants to tag along, but Mr. Incredible says, nope, I don't think so.
I am your
He knows
#1
everything.
fan.
It's crazy. Bro got yeeted out the Tesla. A little later now, and in the middle of some bad guy confrontation, Mr. Incredible runs into Elastigirl. That's Elastigirl, one word. I've actually been pronouncing this Elastic Girl for the past 20 years, but turns out I've been wrong this entire time. Her thing is that she's very stretchy. It's pretty cool. She can move around a lot. The main thing to take away from this scene is that there's a lot of sexual tension between both of these heroes. They flirt a lot and are clearly into each other. They should get married or something. Now, this movie has a lot of dark scenes coming up, but this next one is the first glimpse into that world. If you're under the age of 12, please click the iShow speed stream you have in your recommended. In this next scene, we see some guy standing on top of a very large building and jumping off in an attempt to commit. Thankfully, Mr. Incredible hits the quick time event successfully and times his jump perfectly to catch him in the air and bring him into the building he jumped off of. This guy is either the luckiest or the unluckiest guy of all time. With this random dude saved, you'd think that the day's over, but as fate would have it, turns out this building they're in is a bank, and it just so happens that there's a robbery going on. This is when we meet the most underrated character in the entire movie, Bon Voyage. He's a French mime. His name is clever because Bon Voyage in French means like good trip in a kind of haha see you later loser kind of way. Listen, this is like his only scene in the entire movie. I just think he has a funny name. Mr. Incredible is ready to take him on when the kid from earlier randomly shows up and then screws everything up. Remember him? Surely he won't turn into an evil Tony Stark or something. That would be crazy. Anyway, the kid just wants to help, but he ends up screwing everything up like I said. Bon Voyage attaches a bomb to his cape. Mr. Incredible jumps on him and manages to eventually take the bomb off, but not before it blows up an elevated train track, which Mr. Incredible stops with his bare hands. Usually I'd praise a scene like this for conveying such an iconic premise into visual form, but Spider-Man 2 came out like 4 months before this movie did, and it had a scene just like this, so I don't know, El Bozo, bro thinks he's Spider-Man. The next shot here is, wouldn't you know it, a wedding. Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl are getting married. This movie does that goofy superhero thing where heroes wear a thin eye mask to hide their identity, and when they take it off, like no one recognizes them at all. It's like every hero just has 99 sneak or something. Anyway, Bob and Helen, which are their real names, get married, and everything is pretty much perfect.
We're superheroes. What could happen?
What could happen? The government. The government could happen. So, because Mr. Incredible was trying to save that one guy who was skydiving without a parachute, the world basically turns on heroes overnight. The idea here is that this random guy wanted to die, but Mr. Incredible stopped him from doing that, and in the process broke his neck or something. You know that one meme that's like, this is my face when Hulk throws my car at a villain? Well, in this world, that actually happens, and innocent civilians get hurt all the time because of it. There's like a bajillion lawsuits against superheroes, and so superheroes as a concept are banned from society. They're allowed to live their normal lives in secret, but it's illegal for them to use their powers powers. And that's basically the whole intro sequence to this movie. Honestly, dabbling into topics like politics, social outrage, and even death in the first 10 minutes of your animated kids movie sounds like a horrible idea on paper, but I promise you this is good shit, okay? Just trust me. We then skip 15 years into the future when we see Bob living a regular boring life at his regular boring job. Bob looks kind of sad and he just really hates the life that he's living. How relatable. He has an angry boss who's always angry. He's very angry. That's like his only trait. On the bright side, since we move 15 years into the future, Bob and Helen now have kids. 3 of them, to be exact. There's Dash. He can run really fast because, of course he can. His name is Dash. There's Violet. She can turn invisible and she mostly wears purple because, you know, her name is Violet. And her favorite character from Breaking Bad is Marie. And finally, there's the baby of the family. His name is Jack Jack. He's a bit different than the rest because not only does he not have any known powers at this point in time, but his name also doesn't make some extremely obvious observation about his appearance. Like, I'm surprised they didn't call him Spike or Pointy or something like that. Anyway, everyone's home for dinner now, including Bob, who's really mad because he had to trade his awesome Tesla in for a Little Tykes Cozy Coupe 30th anniversary car large edition. Everyone's eating and kind of arguing at the same time. The mom is disappointed because her son is using his powers at school. The dad is kind of excited when he hears this because even the slightest mention of someone using their superpowers brings this guy a tiny shred of hope in an otherwise miserable and depressing life. Rated T for teen, by the way. Depression's awesome. The dad gets so excited that he breaks a plate, so he leaves, and then the oldest siblings fight over some random bullshit. I don't know, it's not important. Also, to keep my tradition up of pausing the movie at random moments just to find goofy little frames, here's a frame of Dash being squished like a pancake. He's like running and then, oh, wait for it. Hey, look at, hey. But then everyone stops fighting immediately because a secret mystery person rings the doorbell. Is it a supervillain or a CIA agent maybe? Nope, it's actually just a close friend of the family named Lucius, but you probably know him better as Frozone. If somehow you don't know this guy, he can spray ice out of his hands, pretty much.
Nice of you to drop by.
Never heard that one before.
He's like, that's so funny, dude. F off. Anyway, the reason this guy showed up is because it's Wednesday, which means it's bowling night. At least that's what these two tell their wives, because what Frozone and Mr. Incredible actually do is sneak out and use their powers to stop bad guys and save the innocent. As much as I'd love to see a guy who can lift up a car, go bowling for 2 hours, that unfortunately doesn't happen here. 2 important things to note before we continue. 1, Frozone mentions an ex-superhero by the name of Gazer Beam. Apparently he had trouble adjusting to a regular life and no one has seen him in a while. And 2, there's a lady in a car literally right across the street spying on our 2 heroes. Like literally within talking distance, by the way. They could probably hold a conversation if they really wanted to. Anyway, there's a fire or something nearby, so Bob and Frozone take it upon themselves to save everyone who might be stuck there. This on paper is a horrible idea, at least for Frozone, considering his entire thing is like completely useless when surrounded by fire. Also, maybe he has super strength as well. He's carrying like 3 adult bodies on his back in this scene, which, like, you know, even if they're only 100 pounds each, would still be a lot to like carry around and run with. Does he have more powers? Is this just a silly cartoon goof? Let me know in the comments. These two save a bunch of people and then there's some shenanigans where they have to like free someone. It's really cool. But eventually our boys get away and go back home. But here's when Bob has to overcome his biggest obstacle yet, an angry wife in the middle of the night. I'm shivering. This is genuinely terrifying. So Helen almost immediately finds out what Bob's actually been up to, which causes a big argument. It's mentioned that Bob is always trying to relive his glory days, which is a problem. Helen doesn't let their son Dash play sports because he's too fast, which is a problem. Violet doesn't get mentioned at all because, I don't know. I guess. Anyway, speeding through this next day now, Bob is at work and wants to die. His boss is being a big meanie, as he does, so Bob finally decides he's had enough and just straight up tries to suffocate him. But of course he can't really do that because this is meant to be a kid's movie, so instead, Bob decides to hit him with the old Falcon Punch.
Falcon!
Bob obviously gets fired here because he like straight up just killed his boss. But thankfully there is some sort of NSA agent that takes care of all the iffy stuff. This guy pays people off, he erases some memories. That way Bob isn't revealed as a superhero to the world around him. Cool way of doing it. I guess they just like Men in Black everyone. Later that night, Bob is at home when he notices a weird tablet in his work folder. Turns out the lady who was spying on him that one night planted this tablet at work while he was choking his boss. This tablet says a secret message meant specifically for Bob, basically saying, hey, call us back, we like your powers and we want to work with you, we'll give you lots of money. And it's funny because this show wastes like no time, because the very next day Bob, who I will now be calling Mr. Incredible officially, is on a private jet and getting debriefed on a special mission.
It got smart enough to wonder why it had to take orders.
We lost control. And now
This movie's talking about rogue AI back in 2004, dude. That's actually pretty wild. So you're probably wondering to yourself, Darzii, when does this movie actually get pretty dark? Don't worry, we're almost there. It gets pretty f***ed up. Anyway, so Mr. Incredible gets dropped off and is on an island to fight this big AI robot that's unstoppable, apparently. This girl saw his powers. She hired him to fight this robot. It's really cool. This thing proves to be a serious match for Mr. Incredible. It takes some hits, it dodges and counters some attacks. It's the real deal. Or should I say real steel? Get it? because robots. Anyway, this fight is super epic. It's basically Naruto versus Sasuke, just trust me. Eventually though, Mr. Incredible actually gets inside the robot, which gets the AI all confused, and the robot just starts hitting himself, which sounds very stupid, honestly, and is the gaming equivalent of killing your own teammates in CS2. Mr. Incredible beats this thing basically no problem, and is later having dinner with the spy lady. Her name is Mirage, by the way. I forgot if I mentioned that. There's a fair bit of sexual tension here again. Mirage is definitely flirting, and Mr. Incredible definitely does nothing to stop it at all. So add infidelity to the list of adult themes this movie has. The next day now, and Bob is seen being a lot happier with his family. He actually shows affection towards his wife and kids. He spends time with them. He also kisses Violet on the nose in a weird way. Like, why did he do it like that? This leads into a montage where Bob goes back and forth between fighting evil robots for this random company and being really happy with his family. Honestly, it's kind of the perfect gig for him. The only real problem with it, if you want to nitpick, is that you're constantly lying to literally everyone you love, and you could possibly die at a moment's notice. But other than that, yeah, perfect gig. But then, it's here when we're introduced to arguably the most memorable character in the entire franchise, Edna Mode. Bob visits this mansion, which belongs to a person named Edna. She used to be a costume designer for all the superheroes and still kind of does exactly that, but like in secret now, I guess. Also, side note, I didn't mention this earlier, but I probably should have. The NSA agent, Gazerbeam, and Edna can all be seen attending the wedding at the very beginning of the movie. Just thought it was a clever thing. Wanted to show you. So Bob's here to get a new suit from Edna. He's got a bunch of ideas which are taken into consideration, but the only rule Edna has is that there cannot be a cape. Great look, dude.
Cape and the boots.
No capes.
No capes. True, no capes. Pretty sure everyone hated capes after this movie. That's funny. Later that day, while Edna gets the suit ready, the Incredible household gets a phone call. Turns out it's Mirage, and she's calling Mr. Incredible for another job. Not sure why she's calling the house phone and not some secret cell phone or something. Helen just straight up hears the conversation because of this, and now thinks her husband is cheating on her. So Mr. Incredible is now on the island again, presumably to fight another robot. But this is when we finally get the big reveal on what's really going on here. Mr. Incredible gets caught by the robot, and just as he's about to disconnect from the server, Buddy shows up. That's the kid from the very beginning of the movie that loved Mr. Incredible. Like with the bomb and everything. You remember him? So yeah, that's him, but now he's going by the name Syndrome, which that's definitely the name. So Syndrome monologues about how he looked up to Mr. Incredible, but he never gave him the time of day, which disappointed him, giving truth to that one saying that you should never meet your heroes. Because of this, Syndrome vowed to become super himself and ultimately take those who've wronged him out. Or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. His intentions become more clear later on. Bro is yapping. That's all he does. Like,
you got me monologuing.
that's what I said. Important to note that Syndrome is just super powerful here, by the way. He doesn't have any actual powers, but his tech is so advanced that he could literally whip Mr. Incredible around like he's an NPC on Gmod. And this is the point in the movie, I think, when this story takes a serious narrative turn. Mr. Incredible jumps into the water and ultimately ends up in a cave in an effort to hide from Syndrome. He's hidden for now, but in this abandoned cave, he finds none other than superhero Gazerbeam. Now, when he finds Gazerbeam, he's already long gone. His flesh and organs have already decomposed, and his bones and clothes are the only thing that remains. As a kid, honestly, I had no idea what was going on here, but really, when you think about it, it's pretty dark. And again, it's not really the most disturbing part of this movie, but you know, like, I don't know, this guy's dead. It's kind of weird. There's some sort of drone that enters the cave and scans the area to see if there's any signs of life. Mr. Incredible somehow avoids this, so now Syndrome thinks that he's dead. And he's also got the smuggest look I think I've ever seen on someone's face ever. Like, this is anime girl levels of smug. During this, on Helen's side, we find out that she herself is visiting Edna because she suspects that her husband is up to something. Your husband suddenly leaves to go on business trips like every other week. How perceptive. She's so like weird. I don't know.
Edna Mode.
She said it. She said the thing.
And guess.
And guess. I love that part. This scene with Helen and Edna is kind of just there to showcase the rest of the family's superpowers for later. After Bob visited, Edna made suits for the entire family, which is also important. The suits all do special things to accommodate for everyone's unique powers, but perhaps the most important part is that every suit comes with a tracker pre-installed. This means Helen can look at this very early 2000s device to find out where her husband actually is. Remember this? It's very important. Back to Mr. Incredible now. He finally leaves the cave and comes up with a plan to find out what's really going on. It's obviously pretty heroic of him to put his life on the line to figure all this out, but also he's kind of trapped on this island forever if he doesn't find a helicopter or something. So
Watch your jet, bro. Watch your jet!
Mr. Incredible sneaks around for a bit. He then kills some guys. It's a fun time. He eventually makes his way into the main building and then into a secret command center where all the information is held. And this is where things get dark. Mr. Incredible is alone in a room with just a single walkway leading to a single computer. He slowly navigates his way to a folder labeled Supers. He clicks enter, or in this case return, it's the same thing. What plays next is a sequence of images showing specific superheroes on the left and specific robot models on the right. One by one, the matchup on screen crosses out either the hero or the robot shown. People like Universal Man, Psych Wave, Macro Burst, Blaze-Stone, Downburst, Hypershock. There's a lot of these guys. The robot side, however, keeping the name Omnidroid, whilst only changing its version number. The robot side getting eliminated at a much slower pace, while the hero side sometimes losing matchups 5 times in a row. The overwhelming shock covers Mr. Incredible's face as he realizes what's going on. For each of these matchups, the robots only got stronger, while each of these heroes just became another statistic. And then, probably the moment that hits the hardest when you understand the context of everything, Gazer Beam pops up and is shown to be eliminated. Mr. Incredible quickly searches his own name and is finally shown to be eliminated himself. This is a giant database keeping track of every hero that has stepped on this island and fought these robots before. Every hero shown here has died and was brought up the same way Mr. Incredible was, but sadly, they weren't so lucky. So all that to say, this movie's pretty dark sometimes. Helen is pretty worried about her husband because she just has no idea where he could be, so she activates the tracker on his suit in what's probably the best example of COD timing I've ever seen. Mr. Incredible gets captured, and it's really sad and stuff. The next day, Helen decides enough is enough, so she somehow gets a private jet and flies all the way to the island that the tracker is coming from. Of course, there's some wacky cartoon problem, and it turns out that the older kids snuck onto the jet with their mom and are now coming on this mission with her. It's only the 2 older kids, though. The baby, Jack, is just chilling with a babysitter. What could go wrong? During this, the bad guy is talking to Mr. Incredible. Nothing really happens here, except he does hit a big red button, which of course sends a bunch of missiles towards the jet. Everyone's in. They try to dodge it, Star Fox style, but obviously they can't do that. So Helen, who I'll be calling Elastigirl from now on, yells at her daughter to put a force field around the plane. I forgot to mention that, by the way, but yeah, Violet can turn invisible and create like these weird energy force field things. It's pretty cool. The jet is too big, however, so just when everyone is about to actually die, Elastigirl grabs both of the children to protect them from the blast. They survive this because of the special suits they're wearing and land safely into the ocean because not only can Elastigirl turn into a parachute, but also an actual boat. Not sure why, but this is just like really funny to me. It's weird. I love it.
I'll crush her.
Oh, that sounds a little dark for you.
Yeah, it is dark,
go ahead.
actually.
Like breaking a toothpick.
Jesus, this is actually kind of fucked
Show
up,
me.
dude. What the hell? Eventually, the family seeks refuge inside a cave. This looks familiar, but a bunch of stuff happens and they have to leave the cave or something. It's pretty cool. Watch the movie if you're interested. It's not really that I don't care about this scene. It's just really hard to condense an entire movie into a 20-minute video, plus explaining plot points, plus giving my own opinion sometimes. I'm doing my best here. Okay, this is a great movie. Thanks to Mirage switching sides out of nowhere, Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible are able to reunite. It's very emotional and a little predatory, honestly. Violet and Dash finally have their own little moment in this film. They get into some trouble and are forced to use their powers to get out of it. It's honestly very cool and probably all around my favorite scene in the entire movie. Not gonna lie. Again, you should watch this movie if you want to see it because it's really cool. Sticking to the main plot points though, the entire family finally gets together, but it doesn't go so well because Syndrome shows up with his mod status and insta-bans everyone from the server.
User disconnected from your channel.
The family gets captured, and then Syndrome finally explains what the whole point of this is. Turns out he's been building up this giant killer robot that no super could beat, but that he has direct control over. The idea is that he lets the robot loose in some city, and then it like kills a bunch of people and no one can stop it. But then because he has like a remote control thing, he can pretend to beat it, and then everyone's gonna love him for like saving the day or something. Not sure what he's gonna do when there's like an actual really powerful bad guy that shows up, but yeah, anyway. To make a long story short, the family escapes because, obviously, the giant killer AI robot is making its way destroying a city, and then we get this scene that's probably the most famous line in any animated movie ever.
Honey,
There it is.
where's my super suit? Where
Is my super suit? People are dying because the robot is evil, but luckily for them, Syndrome has arrived. His plan is actually going really well. That is, until the robot becomes fully sentient out of nowhere, and Syndrome loses control of it entirely. Who saw that coming? The Incredibles family finally arrives in an RV, which is the second Breaking Bad reference in this movie, despite releasing 4 years prior. Everyone works together, including Frozone, who we finally get to see in action in full force. It's super epic and kind of perfect in every way. I love this man. Ultimately, none of their powers can defeat the robot, though, so what they end up doing, get this, is using a piece of its own claw to pierce through its armor. It's a really clever way, right? And it kills the robot's dead. But let me remind you, this is the exact way Mr. Incredible initially defeated the earlier version of the robots all that time ago. Like, I thought the point of bringing the supers to the island was to improve the robots, but this one has the exact same weakness as the last one did. I'm not sure what they improved from that version to this version, but apparently it wasn't its one crucial weakness. How strange. The day is saved and everyone just likes heroes again now. But then our story isn't over because Syndrome is a petty piece of garbage and will do anything to win. So once the family arrives back home, we see Syndrome kidnapping Jack just cause, you know, Mr. Incredible, I guess. But sadly for Syndrome, this is when the audience finally finds out that Jack does actually have powers. And it's like a mix of a lot of things. He lights himself on fire, he turns himself into tungsten, he transforms into a level 3 goblin at one point. It's pretty cool. Eventually, the family does get their baby back, and the final chapter in Syndrome's story ends with probably the craziest and darkest moment of all. This is when his cape gets caught in a turbine engine of the plane above him, and he gets sucked in and just dies.
Knock it!
And that's the end of the movie, The Incredibles. There's the actual last scenes where Dash is allowed to play sports and Violet is more confident in herself. It's all really nice. Obviously, I skipped over a lot of the good detail that makes this movie so good, but this video is already long enough as it is. I figured I'd stick to the main plot. But all that to say, yeah, this movie is pretty dark. People die in this movie. Like, a lot of people die in this movie. There's a bunch of things here that I just didn't understand as a kid, like the whole cheating on your wife thing, or the whole side thing. Remember that? That was wild. But even through all the extremely mature themes, this movie still finds itself being very entertaining past that. It's the reason clueless children and cynical adults can both enjoy this movie at the same time. It explores some crazy topics, but it's also just a fun ride that most people can enjoy. And at the end of the day, that's all I really wanted to say about it. Good movie. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Like, comment, and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 25K before my birthday. That would be awesome. Become a member if you can afford it and want your name at the end of all my videos for the world to see. Thank you to all my members. I appreciate you guys so much. Paula Abdul scores this one a solid Omni Droid version 5 out of 5. And yeah, thanks for watching.
Sounds a little dark for you.
Yeah, it is dark,
Go ahead.
actually.
Knock it!